And now we're live, Mr. Mayor.
All right, everyone, I'd like to start today by acknowledging we're gathered here today on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. And with the quorum present, I'd like to call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. And as council knows, we have the option of removing items from the consent agenda and place them under new business. So I'd like to ask council that we remove item 2.2.1 and move that to new business. And I'll ask council if there are any other items you'd like to move to new business. If not, I'd ask someone to move the recommendation. Councillor Finley? Okay, move the recommendation. Recommendation moved by Councillor Finley, seconder Councillor Toporowski. Any discussion? All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to approval of the regular agenda. I'll ask any member of council would like to move the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Justice, second by Councillor Toporowski. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to the mayor's report, and I'll be brief. I'd like to give council an update on some of the meetings and events that I've attended in recent weeks, along with some members of council as well. First of all, last week, Councillor Eustache and I attended the annual general meeting of the Chemainus and District Chamber of Commerce. It was a chance to discuss North Cowichan's priorities over the coming months and years and to get feedback from the Chemainus business community. I want to congratulate the Chamber's new board of directors, including new president Bill McKinney, and really looking forward to working with this group over the coming months and years. Along with councillors Callio and Finley, last week we had an opportunity to join the North Cowichan bylaw enforcement officers and the RCMP for a walkabout through the area surrounding the Warmland Center and the overdose prevention site along York Road, Lewis Street, Beverly Street, and even parts of the Salmonose Marsh Conservation Area. These are the parts of our community that are seeing the biggest challenges related to homelessness, mental health, and addictions, which are impacting local residents, their families, surrounding neighborhoods, schools, businesses as well. I appreciated seeing our bylaw enforcement team in action. They've built positive and cooperative relationships with many of the local folks currently living on the street and face many of these challenges. And however, as was apparent to us during the walkabout of this area, we're facing some pretty big issues here that are going to require solutions that are outside our limited powers as a municipality. And related to that, I'd note that in recent weeks, I've had a chance to meet with several experts in mental health and addictions treatment, including an operator of several clinics, facilities on the mainland, and professors from Simon Fraser University's Center for Applied Research in Mental Health and Addictions. And talking to these folks has given me a much better understanding of the current gaps in our services for mental health and addictions treatment, and also a better sense of what we're going to need to be advocating for with the senior levels of government. Obviously, as a municipality, we're not in the business of providing these services directly, but we do have an important role in terms of advocacy. And as was previously discussed at this table, in March, the province announced they'd be providing a $1 billion investment to expand mental health and addiction services, and it's going to be important for us as a municipality and as a region to make sure that some of this funding is invested in our community. So I'd now like to move on to delegations, and we have one delegation today from Social Planning Cowichan, and I'd like to invite Rosalie Sari to present to council. Welcome.
Hello, thank you. It's nice to be here. Flashbacks. Great to see you all in person. Thank you for having us today. I just want to make a few introductions before I start our video. We have Rupert and Sandra here, who are also staff at Social Planning Cowichan, and then Nora's on our board, who's joined us this evening as well. So thanks to them. And Councillor Callio is actually our liaison for social planning as well, and came out to our first board meeting a few weeks ago. So nice to see you. We have a video. It's a bit of an awkward situation. I'll just give you a little intro to that as well. So it's going to play all the way out, and I'm going to ask for pauses along the way. Yeah, we did a whole PowerPoint embedded with videos, which didn't work with the text, so apologies for that. So we just wanted to meet with you today and give you some background about Social Planning Cowichan. We'll start with a brief intro from John Horn, actually, who used to be the executive director of the Cowichan Housing Association, just to kind of explain what social planning is, keep making the joke that we don't do weddings or bat mitzvahs or birthdays or anything like that. It really is taking a look at how things are going in our communities and how people are interacting, which John will give a great explanation. And then it'll move right on to Candace Spilsbury, who'll give you a historical context of social planning and how we got started. She was actually the founding board member of our board, or founding chair, as well as the School District 79 chair for quite a few years as well. So I'll ask the video to start, please.
That make a community gel together. So what are the relationships between the people in the community? What is the relationships between the different economic stratums in the community and the different social groups or the different ethnic groups? So social planning looks at all those aspects of the human relations within a community and looks at how do we support a vibrant, healthy, engaged community to emerge from that.
We can play through to the next part. Thank you.
Proud of being part of Social Planning Cowichan from its initiation. I believe the year was 2004, that after a community process of 2 years of developing the organization, there was a search for directors, and I responded to that call and chaired the organization for 10 years. And during that time, so much work was completed that was absolutely instrumental to moving forward in the community on issues like the housing, childcare, cultural connections, status of the community report, which was the first report that this community received way back when, and they're still involved in working on that. Visions 2020 was accepted from Community Futures, so that is part of what work Social Planning Cowichan continues to do. The NAG Games passed on the vision for the cultural connections work. So I'm very proud of this organization. It's done tremendous work for this community and continues to do so.
Great, we can just pause there for a moment, please. Thanks, Nathan. So as Candace mentioned, some of our core functions are, we did the status of community reports, which is now called community snapshots. So every census, we update data that's going on in the region. And then annually, we also update with whatever information is new and available. We calculate the living wage every year. This past year, it was $23.53 an hour, based on a family of 4 with 2 working full-time parents. And then we also participate in a variety of community tables, just keeping our eye on what's happening and identifying gaps and providing research and support to those issues that are happening around the region. But Social Planning Cowichan was created out of, it is a function of the CVRD. We receive $50,000 as core funding for every year, and that's since 2004. And we were kind of birthed out of the Visions 2020 work that took place in the 90s and then again in the early 2000s that, again, kind of created a vision for 2020 within a variety of scopes and issues in our valley. So some of our featured projects, we can play the video again, please, thank you. We wanted to share with you. We've been working on 2 poverty reduction strategies, one for the town of Lake Cowichan and one for the town of Ladysmith, working with Stamanis. The Lake Cowichan one is called Moving On Up, Cowichan Lake Poverty Reduction Project, and then Community Together to End Poverty, Huanatswalam as one, which is a word, the Hulkaminam word we were gifted or asked to use by a Stamanis elder. And so we've just been, we created strategies for each of them in 2020 and 2021, right during the pandemic, which was lots of fun, created lots of challenges, but through that we have been also applied for secondary funds through UBCM and have been doing some of the action. So it's been a lot of community engagement. We did a free store event in Lake Cowichan where people could donate based on needs required in the community, and people came out, just took what they needed. We offered a free lunch, community services that were available, just creating these opportunities for people to intermingle and reduce the stigma that we that often people feel when they want to utilize services that they may be in need of, or understand that there are services available that can help out. In Ladysmith, we hosted 2 film nights, one on poverty, one on food equity, and then we had dialogues around that. We had a food share event just a couple weeks ago, and as well 2 cultural workshops, among other food security, food equity actions that we took place as well. So all of the stuff that we do, in addition to our core things, are through other grants. And we look forward to continuing the work on our poverty reduction on a regional scale as well. We're really looking forward to spreading that out. The next section we really wanted to share with you is our cultural connections, and many of you may have taken the village workshops, now called Journey of Our Generation. And that work started out of the North American Indigenous Games that happened in 2008. And there should be a video coming up to explain more about the history, but I think there's a pause. So what's happened since the creation of those videos or those workshops is people wanted
We had formed a committee called the Walk of the Nations Festival, and we needed a home. Basically, the Walk of the Nations existed for one time during the North American Indigenous Games, but there was that sort of desire and need in the community to continue on that cultural connection work. So social planning became our home. They accepted us, they welcomed us. And from that grew a number of programs, a number of workshops, and I think it provided a real service that was needed in the community. There was a gap there. And so rather than it being a local government or a business or a corporation or somebody that may not necessarily be the right person to lead that charge, social planning became the facilitator, the advocate, and became the home for that type of cultural connection work.
Reconciliation is it's still a very difficult word for me.
Like one of our elders says, it's a big word. It is a big word. Even when it first started coming out, I had to look it up on dictionary. What does it mean? So I got to understand, yeah, I need to reconcile with myself.
First thing that comes to mind is working together.
We ask for workshops and presentations about reconciliation. I think we have to be vigilant and go do these workshops.
There's not the answer by one voice coming out of me or anybody else. There's not that answer. It takes a whole clump of each one of us coming together and making that work.
I don't want to wish for something that we no longer exists. I want to imagine something that we can create. And I don't know what the word is for that, but it's not decolonization. We can't. We're all colonized. We can't decolonize. We can unwind some things, but more than that, we can imagine something. We can use that wisdom to imagine something new.
Today we won't get those answers. Maybe 20 years we might from now. But at least we're bringing it out.
So some of the photos you saw there are from Cowichan 101 tours that took place around the region with the neighboring nations, showing the culture of the land, history of the land, and also future development projects or current development projects. And then also we did Hulkaminam classes, and we're hoping to bring those back. And then some of the photos from the Big House was Cowichan, which was an event held at Salmon Big House prior to the 2018 election to create a sense of continuing to work together. So the slides you're seeing now are 2 legacy projects that the elders really wanted to see move forward. The first is Thayit, which means truth in Hulkaminam. And this was a multimedia exhibit that took place at the Cowichan Community Center in the art gallery there at the end, or during September of last year into October. We saw 3,000 visitors in under 3 weeks. And this was really just a way to continue on the stories of the elders from the workshops after they've retired. And then the second part is Pei, which meaning cedar, is a second legacy project that consists of a number of pieces in development, which includes planting 3,000 cedar trees in honor of the children who didn't return home from residential schools. After a year of going through cultural protocols required to begin that work, the first planting of 250 trees took place with the George family at Bright Angel Park. A next part of it was, you're seeing photos here of a cedar forum that took place in Lake Cowichan. And this is an important piece to share knowledge about cedar due to climate change and its vulnerability to climate change.
We wanted people to know our history so we could work together.
Thank you. I'll just finish that last bit, and this is the last slide. So that Cedar Forum was an opportunity to share knowledge about Cedar and begin the development of an advisory committee to work on next steps and direction and goals for that legacy bit. Research is being done right now as part of the project on identifying local areas to plant and rebuild healthy ecosystems for cedar to thrive, while working on establishing mechanisms for protecting cedar for harvesting for future generations. So that bit is really important to the elders right now who have been participating in this work. And here we just have a list of work that we're looking into the future on, depending on funding. And I'll finish with wise words from Lucy Thomas.
Can't work together if we don't understand each other. That's what kept coming out.
So we do have a Journey of Our Generation workshop coming up on May 4th, if you'd like.
Gone to previous cultural connections before. This one is different due to Salem's one of the main people that share a story, and it's just very powerful. That's what I wanted to share. But thanks for your presentation, and also just a question about the art gallery. I'm trying to say it the truth.
Thait, yeah.
Thait, yes. Will you be having another one?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So we are looking at sort of a phase 2 now that we had the first exhibit to trial it out.
About it, so yeah.
Oh, great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions from council? All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Sari. Oh, Councillor Justice.
Thank you. Ms. Sari, seems a little strange, but nice to see you, Rosalie.
Nice to see you.
I'm curious. This is something I don't really understand, even though I should probably, given my history with social planning Cowichan, but what work is involved in that work that you do at social planning Cowichan in determining the living wage for the community?
Yeah, so Ryan Watson does an excellent job of that calculation, but it does a fulsome look at how much we're paying for rent, how much, vehicle use. One of the things we did advocate for to the organization that does it is that in a rural setting, we often don't have access to transportation as regularly as, say, Vancouver or Victoria. And so the previous calculation, for example, was based on 2 parents, one taking public transportation, one having a vehicle, whereas here often people have 2 vehicles if they're a family of 4. So that was one of the things that we were able to shift for people who are in more rural locations. But yeah, it looks at basically everything. So what we're paying for food, what we're paying for rent, transportation, daycare, all of those things.
But I mean, social planning Cowichan, or Ryan, is that right, goes out and sort of like comparison shops, and
yeah,
is that how it works?
Yeah, some of the research is available in different ways. But what I remember one year, Christy Wood, who did it in the past, was literally just going through like all the listings of available rents and that kind of thing. Yeah, so it's quite an extensive process.
It must be a lot of work. Thanks.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you for the presentation. Oh, hey, sorry, Councillor Calio. I'm not used to you not being here in person, so over to you.
I just wanted to say thank you, Rosalie, for a wonderful presentation, and I'm looking forward to working with your group and your wonderful people that you have at Social Planning Cowichan in the future. And I think you're doing a great job. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Thanks again for the presentation. Really appreciate it.
Thank
Look
you.
forward to working together. All right, Council, that's the only delegation day, so we now move on to public input. And for anyone online or in the gallery with public input, it's a maximum of 5 speakers, 3 minutes each, with regards to items on the agenda. So I'll first turn to the gallery and ask if there's anyone has any input they'd like to provide to council. Oh, of course. If you could state your name and address.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Joyce Benson, 3177 Drinkwater Road, North Cowichan. I'm referring to 2.2.2, and that's the UBCM seeking municipal land for housing. And I find this interesting that the provincial government is looking to local governments to provide a list of municipally owned land that could potentially be used for housing as the province implements its refreshed housing strategy. And with that in mind, I refer specifically to a project that was mentioned at the last council meeting and also in our local paper last week. And that is reference to the Sherman Road proposed project from back in 2016, which is the Curling Club parking lot and Curling Club land. And it was proposed and a public meeting was held at the Mount Provost School back on January 25th, I believe, 2017, where everyone in the area recognized the value of the soccer fields and the curling club and how important they were, and also the Sikh temple, that parking has always been an issue around there. And it was a proposal for 64 units with 98 parking spaces. Nobody in the area supported it other than Chemainus because they wanted the Willow Street project, and it was sort of a tandem type of thing. I know that Paj Bawa, who lived next door, within 2 days went around and got, I believe it was 51 or 52 signatures against it going in that place because of the high use of that area, especially for curling club events. And I remember a month or two ago, we had a beautiful presentation by the curling club right here as to how busy that place really is, and the recreation is very important. I also lived behind it for 8 years and know how busy the soccer fields stayed. So I'm questioning the fact that municipal property is being suggested as a proposed housing development when it came back to council at the time, and it was increased from 64 units to 95 units, 98 parking spaces to 102. It was a 50% increase, and I was shocked because they said the people don't want anything there, and now it's being proposed to be increased. I don't know where that came from. I don't know if it was staff or whose idea it was, but I'm really questioning the $432,000 out of the housing affordability taxation fund as well going towards that. And here's my real key. The amount of development in this area lately, and I checked with one of the planners, and what he put together really quickly was like 1,000 to 1,100 units have and are being built. I added on quite a few more projects in the Somenos, the Skinner Road, the Drinkwater Road, the Green Road, Sherman Road. We have had a lot of construction since 2016, like major. And at the time, it was also mentioned that C-Wave, Cowichan Women Against Violence, was including 12 transition units in that project. Usually that type of project needs to be somewhere more secluded than on the front of Sherman Road, which is a really high traffic, busy area. So I'm questioning that whole project even moving forward, because at the time when we were asked for land, and that's what this UBCM says.
Ms. Benson, right.
Thank you. At the time when we were asked for land, I mentioned the municipal gravel pit up the road, and suddenly it was for sale, and it wasn't for sale, but it sold. And this project was proposed. I think the time has passed for it being in that location. I thank you very much for that.
Thank you for your input.
It's a big issue. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now turn to IT staff and ask if we have any virtual participants with their hands raised.
Yes, just give me one moment to refresh the attendee screen, Mr. Mayor. And I see no attendees with their hand raised.
All right, thank you. We'll now move on to bylaws, and we'll start with 7.1, Council Procedure Amendment Bylaw number 3902 for adoption. Over to you, Ms. Martina.
Okay, so Council Procedure Amendment Bylaw number 3902 received first 3 readings on March 15th. Notice of the proposed amendments was published in the March 23rd and 30th editions of the Cowichan Valley Citizen and the Chemainus Valley Courier, and posted to North Cowichan's posting places on March 17th. The bylaw, if adopted, will amend Section 7 of the Council Procedure Bylaw number 3602 by striking out that special meetings must be held electronically if the next regular meeting is to be held electronically, to enable the mayor and/or council to schedule a special meeting in person. The recommendation is that council adopt Council Procedure Amendment Bylaw number 3902, 2023.
Moved by Councillor Justice, seconded by Councillor Stash. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to bylaw 7.2. Over to you, Ms. Martineau.
Okay, so Reserve Funds Establishment Amendment Bylaw number 3897 received first three readings on March 15th. The bylaw as it was presented on March 15th, proposed to remove the Aquinas Center Reserve Fund as item 3 in the schedule and insert the Bell McKinnon Local Area Plan Streetscape Reserve Fund in its place to facilitate the implementation of the Bell McKinnon Local Area Plan through amenity contributions, and add the Cowichan Lake Water Quality Reserve as item 38 in the schedule to fund the monitoring and management of the water quality in Cowichan Lake. Staff are recommending that bylaw number 3897 be amended to include the Growing Communities Funds grant as item 39 to the schedule, which is to fund the capital and planning costs from the grant. In order to make the amendment, council must rescind third reading of the bylaw in order to then make the change by resolution and then give the bylaw third reading as amended. This would have to be done in 3 separate motions. So the first motion, or the first recommendation, would be that council rescind third reading of Reserve Funds Establishment Amendment Bylaw number 3897, 2023. And then the second one is that council amend section 3 of Reserve Funds Establishment Amendment Bylaw number 3897, 2023 by inserting and item 39, Growing Community Funds, before to the schedule as follows, and adding the Growing Communities Funds Reserve as item 39 to fund the capital and planning costs from the Growing Communities Fund grant. It's not rolling off my lips tonight. And 3, that council give third reading to Reserve Fund Establishment Amendment Bylaw number 3897, 2023 as amended.
Thank you, Ms. Martineau. Does someone want to move the first recommendation? Moved by Councillor Stash, seconded by Councillor Justice. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Someone will move the second recommendation. Moved by Councillor Finley, seconded by Councillor Stash. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And does someone want to move the third recommendation? Moved by Councillor Stash, seconded by Councillor Toporowski. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. We now move on to item 7.3. Over to you, Ms. Martineau.
Okay, so delegation of authority, bylaw amendment, bylaw number 3898 is before council for first 3 readings. The bylaw proposes to amend section 5 by delegating council's responsibility for giving notice of any changes to the council procedure bylaw to the corporate officer, and changing the responsibility for giving notice of the meeting where the annual report will be considered from the financial officer to the corporate officer, and to amend section 22 by delegating council's authority to issue development variance permits for minor variances under the zoning bylaw which pertain to retaining walls and fences to the Director of Planning and Building. The recommendation is that council gives first, second, and third readings to delegation of authority amendment bylaw number 3898, 2023.
Do we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Toporowski, seconded by Councillor Stash. Discussion? Councillor Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a question with respect to the delegation of authority around the retaining wall regulations. So the report states that the amendment would expedite and simplify the development approval processes by enabling relaxations to the retaining wall regulations, and thus I guess decreasing the workload for council and making things generally more efficient. But I guess that makes sense to me if these are primarily technical decisions that relate to safety considerations and that sort of thing. But is that right, or are these often more political decisions?
Is that a question?
Yeah.
Question for staff.
Question. I guess I'm wondering what disadvantages there are ultimately in, there's obviously some advantages and inefficiencies, but what sort of disadvantages are there in delegating this authority, and I guess what would we be giving up in exchange for that efficiency?
I'm going to turn to our Director of Planning and Building, Rob Conway.
Thank you, Mayor Douglas. So the rationale for the delegation is that with development permits, there's often a more comprehensive plan than you typically get for when, say, a homeowner is just wanting to put a retaining wall in their backyard or something like that. So generally with development permits, we have professional reports, we have landscape architects often involved in the projects, and the grading of the site and the retaining structures, if they're necessary, are usually part of that overall comprehensive development. So rather than have two separate processes, which would be the alternative, where the variances for, say, an increase in the retaining wall height would have to go through council, and then having a separate process for the development permit, which would be approved by staff, this delegation would allow the application to be processed as a single application rather than two applications, and that's where the efficiencies come from. I believe the risk that you're alluding to, Councillor Justice, would be, or what council might be giving up, is that discretion to consider input from adjacent property owners that would typically come with a development variance permit. And I would suggest that this delegation would be used sensitively around in those situations where there's a proposed retaining wall that would impact an adjacent property owner. And I think that's why when you read the delegation language, there is some criteria in there that is meant to provide some guidance as to when that authority would be used. And if, just as an example, let's say that there was a very tall retaining wall proposed next to a single family dwelling, I would suggest that the delegated authority, which in this case is me, would be quite cautious with granting variances in those situations, because by referring it back to council, that would trigger a notification of adjacent property owners and allow that input.
Oh, okay. So you would, at times, even given the delegation of authority, you might, in certain cases, refer it back to council?
Yes, the delegated authority allows the delegate to deny the permit, and then there's an appeal process that would require that the application go to council. So that's essentially how the process works. If the delegate doesn't approve it, then it goes to council, and then council can consider it at that point.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Conway, just to build on Councillor Justice's comments, I appreciate how you've explained the rationale to us that these delegated powers would be used carefully, and have a lot of confidence in your department using these powers very carefully based on your comments. However, as we've seen at this municipality over the years, I mean, I've been here on my 9th year now, there are new staff, people come and go who don't necessarily have the corporate memory. Are you confident that based on the way this is worded, that we can have that same confidence maybe in future staff that are going to exercise these powers as carefully as you've indicated you will be, assuming this bylaw is passed today?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. That whoever the decision maker is, there's always that risk that people are unhappy with the decision, or that maybe the decision wasn't thought through properly. The development permit guidelines that we work with are intended to get at that to some degree, where there are guidelines that give some direction to staff as to what they should be approving or not approving, putting some sort of boundaries on that power. There already is quite a bit of delegated powers around development permits that are authorized, and I guess the only change that's being proposed here is to be able to allow some increases to retaining wall heights or the location of retaining walls that differ a little bit from the zoning. But I would suggest that a bunch of that delegated power is already in place through the ability to issue development permits and to use discretion when reviewing development permit applications and applying the guidelines. I do understand your question, and there probably is some room within the guidelines to better describe when variances to retaining walls would be appropriate. And updates to the development permit guidelines is some work that's in the upcoming work plans, and if that's a concern for council, we can certainly put some focus on providing better development permit guidelines to help with this issue. I guess just lastly, ultimately, if council's unsatisfied with how the delegated authority is being implemented, there's always that ability for council to amend the bylaw and deal with the variances directly yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Conway. I think Councillor Justice, you had another comment?
Thank you. No, I would just concur that I would, in general, as these development permit guidelines are redone, appreciate some clarity about what sorts of decisions might trigger reference to council.
Mr. Conway, can we assume that this will be on your team's radar as you're updating the development permit guidelines, or do you think a motion from council would be helpful in this regard?
I'd be happy to just take that as direction, and we can identify guidelines for retaining walls as something to be considered when we next update the development permit guidelines. We can do that without a council resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. I'll just look around the table here. There's two of us I think are in agreement that would make sense. Just want to make sure the rest of council is comfortable with that as well. Yeah. Not seeing anyone shaking their heads. All right. Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Conway. Oh, Councillor Stash.
Just a quick comment, Your Worship, was just to say thanks to staff that they've made these changes, because this came up in the public hearings for the retaining wall bylaw, and it was the developers that came to the public hearing gave feedback with regards to the development, not the individual homeowner's perspective, but when developers are coming in, is these simple little smart changes from council and staff together are going to help developers expedite the backlog. So I just want to thank staff for continually looking at ways that we can make things more expeditious, if that's the word, a fancy word of the day. So just a thanks as always.
Thanks, Councillor Stash. Well, we've got a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. Can we call the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to item 7.4. Over to you, Ms. Martina.
Okay, so next there are three bylaws before council for first three readings. The first one, the Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 3903, which proposes to amend the wording for late payment penalties, move the fee adjustment provisions for water leaks from the Waterworks bylaw to the Fees and Charges bylaw, and add an administration fee of $50, reduce the waste collection fee from $183 to $153, move the fees related to parks and recreation into a separate bylaw, add mobile home park permit fees, and update the schedule related to wharf fees. The Parks and Recreation Fees and Charges Bylaw number 3899 proposes to establish a multi-fee structure to come into effect on September 1st of each year for the fees that are being moved from the Fees and Charges Bylaw, with increases of 5% in year one and 2% in subsequent year for all admission and facility rental fees. The Waterworks Amendment Bylaw number 3904 proposes to remove the provisions that are being moved to the Fees and Charges Bylaw, add a definition for collector, update the provisions under Section 17 to provide clarity when water restrictions are in effect, update the provisions under Section 19 to remove the requirement for a council resolution to authorize certain commercial enterprises to be exempt from the water restrictions, update the provisions under Section 44 to provide clarity and establish a time limit for a fee adjustment, and a couple minor updates to the wording in Schedule 1. The recommendations are that council give first, second, and third readings to fees and charges amendment bylaw number 3903, 2023. The second recommendation is that council give first, second, and third readings to park and recreation fees and charges bylaw number 3899, 2023. And the third one is that council give first, second, and third readings to waterworks amendment bylaw number 3904, 2023.
Councillor Justice, I saw your hand up. Do you have a question or do you want to move the first recommendation?
What I would like to do is just ask a question, because I think it's related to all three of these bylaws. And this is with respect to the water leaks provisions, which I think appears in at least two of these, but maybe three of these bylaws. And I guess, Mr. Mayor, it seems to me that the changes made in these bylaws make it harder for people to request reductions in excessive water bills related to leaks. And so, for example, there's the $50 administrative fee. There's the provision that the leak has to be fixed within a certain period of time by a professional plumber, and that an invoice is presented, and that there's a provision that if somebody's applied for an adjustment within the last 5 years, they're ineligible. And the maximum charge has been raised from $500 to $1,000. So I just I'm generally wondering what problem we're trying to solve here. And are we really so inundated with requests for reductions in water bills related to leaks that we need to make it that much harder, add these complexities to make it harder for people to request these adjustments?
I'll turn to Ms. Saldera.
Thank you for the questions. So there's a few reasons for the adjustments, including making it more clear as to when adjustments will be applied and establishing a framework for the information that's necessary in order to receive an adjustment. Our goal is to encourage people to fix leaks expeditiously so that water is not wasted. We do have water shortages all the time, and so establishing some ground rules with respect to how quickly people should get them fixed helps encourage them to be fixed more quickly, and also to have them fixed professionally so that the leak doesn't recur from year to year. And so we're mostly trying to save water, but then also to establish a process. So it really does take quite a bit of staff time to address all of the requests that come in for very small leak adjustments in some, or adjustments in some cases. So it takes quite a number of hours for staff to talk to the person, work through the process, find out if they've gotten it fixed, ask for all of the information. Then it has to go to engineering. Sometimes they have to send somebody out to inspect. Sometimes we might have to send staff out to reread the meter. Not that we wouldn't continue to do these sorts of things, just it is quite an amount of staff time to do it. And then reissuing and reprocessing the bills also does take staff time. So staff did a review of several other local governments on the island to see what they are doing with respect to their leak forgiveness policies. And we have given it a slightly longer timeline than we found in others, but we're just trying to be more in conformance with what those others have done. We're also updating, we will, if council agrees to this change, we will be updating the provisions on our website as well to give some very clear direction to people for what is required with respect to requests for leak adjustments.
Okay, just a follow up. Just, go for it. So it really is a fairly significant problem and onerous on staff time.
It is.
Yeah, I had no idea. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Councillor Finlay.
I just have a couple, I guess, simple questions. How often do we check water meters per year at this time?
Meters are read 3 times a year for residential and 4 for commercial.
Okay, and was that the case also before we started breaking down the building to
Yes.
3 times a year? Okay. So second question is there a way for us, if we don't already, I guess, when we do the water metering, meter reading, can we not have a system in place that says, okay, this property usually uses 1,000 liters a quarter, and now it's 5,000 liters a quarter? Will that not send a red flag with us internally? Is that something we have or something we can do?
So that is absolutely how most people find out that they have a leak, is when we read the meters, we process the bills at the time, and we've always done this. So we have our overage billing is done 3 times a year, and so that's when people become aware of the fact that they have a leak in most cases. In some cases, it's just that people are put in a big garden or have a new grass, so they go over, but in the majority of cases, that is people's first hint that they do have a leak.
Awesome, thanks.
Any other further questions from council? Councillor Justice?
Yeah, thank you. This is with respect to some of the exemptions for businesses, with respect to stage 2 and stage 3 water restrictions. One of the types of businesses that's listed in there are tree farms, and I was wondering about tree farms because my understanding is we don't supply water for agricultural purposes, and tree farm sounds a lot like agricultural purpose. So is tree farm really a sort of business we should be exempting from water restrictions?
I think this is a question for Mr. Rietsma.
That's a very good question, Councillor Justice. I don't believe we have a lot of tree farms, and I'm not even aware of any actually that actually use water. I'd have to look into that for you to get back to you on that. That's about all I can say right now about tree farms.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from council? No? All right, so we've got 3 recommendations in front of us. Does someone want to move the first recommendation? Moved by Councillor Stash, seconded by Councillor Justice. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Someone want to move the second recommendation? Moved by Councillor Justice, seconded by Councillor Toporowski. Any discussion? Councillor Finlay.
So I just have a couple questions on the fees for Parks and Rec here. And maybe it's just maybe a little nitpicking on my part, but we have things like access to the pool for $2.05. It goes to $2.10, then goes to $2.15 every couple of years. Is there an opposition to go from $2 now to $2.50? You know, like they just seem like really, really small increments. And I understand that, you know, everybody's hurting a little bit here, but we've got excessive costs that we've got to cover as well. So I'm just curious about why the very slow incline on a bunch of the Parks and Rec fees.
Okay, I'm going to turn to Mr. Pukish to answer this one.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Great question, Councillor Finlay. Yeah, what we do is we kind of look at a gradual increase. We don't want to go too much, and we've selected the 2% based on the standard CPI increases that we've seen in the past. It doesn't amount to much, but it's a reflection of kind of the average of coastal communities on Vancouver Island and the Sunshine Coast. So that's what we base that upon. If council is willing to go higher, we can certainly look at that and explore that option, but we've kind of taken best practices, and through the BCRPA, we kind of reflect the average pricing from what's out there currently.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions from council? All right. Confirm with the corporate officer. We moved and seconded this, right? Okay. All right. We ready for the question then? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to the third recommendation regarding the water. Oh, Councillor Callio, I apologize. I keep looking around the table here. Over to you.
I was just going to ask Mr. Pukash about the wharf fees for, like, why is the wharf fee for Maple Bay different from the wharf fees at Crofton and Chemainus, and it's a little bit lower than the rest of them? I'm just curious as to why that is.
That's a great question. Actually, the wharf fees, I can't speak to that. I'll put that over to General Manager George Farkas. He can follow up on that.
Yeah, so I'll ask Mr. Cater to speak to it, who's has worked on the fees.
Thank you for that question. Similar to what Mr. Pukish had talked about with regards to the fees, our objective was to move the fees forward in an amount that was similar to the cost of living. So the costs right now for Maple Bay have typically been lower than the other facilities. A lot has to do with the services that are supplied in those locations. So there's water, Wi-Fi, things like that that are not included in Maple Bay. So one of the main reasons why it's a little bit lower, but we've tried to increase them all to the cost of living.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, any further discussion from council? So could I get someone want to move the recommendation with regards to the Waterworks Amendment bylaw? Moved by Councillor Justice, seconded by Councillor Stash. Any further discussion? Further discussion, all in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to item 7.5. Over to you, Ms. Martineau.
Okay, so 2023 to 2027 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw number 3905 is before Council for first three readings. The bylaw proposes to amend the Financial Plan bylaw by including the Growing Communities Fund grant and reducing the annual waste collection revenue by $30 per household. The recommendation is that Council give first, second, and third readings to 2023 to 2027 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw number 3905, 2023.
All right, we've discussed this at length in recent months, so does someone want to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Justice, seconded by Councillor Toporowski. Councillor Stash?
Your Worship, just, I don't think with our last meeting being that we had the new amounts coming in, what is our actual taxation increase now with the adjustment in here for the grants that we just got?
I'll turn to Ms. Hildar.
I believe it's 4.32. We will be bringing a comprehensive report on the tax rates to the Committee of the Whole on April 11th.
Thank you.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to reports. The first report here, item 8.1, the NAV Canada proposed telecom tower siting for 531 Maple Mountain Road. I'll turn to Mr. Farkas.
Thank you, Mayor. The purpose of this report is to consider a request for a statement of concurrence and an amendment to a statutory right-of-way associated with the proposed telecommunications antenna on Maple Mountain. The recommendation is as it's worded in the agenda. And we have staff here to respond to any questions that council may have.
Councillor Stash.
My only question was, is this in the existing BC Hydro right-of-way that it's falling under?
Mr. Farkas?
I'll ask Mr. Morris to respond to that, please.
Yes, that's correct. The intent is to site tower within the hydro right away.
And then my only other question was that it shows that they have two access points they're wanting to create, and I just couldn't get clarity in the report. Were they actually going to be, there's an area that doesn't have trees, but it looks like they want to put the road right through where the only trees are, creating an access off the upper road. So I was just wondering, like, are they removing trees to do that?
No, my understanding from reading the environmental assessment report is that they're picking their path very carefully to get to the site, and doing so in a means that they're not going to damage the existing tree roots or any of the area that's supporting existing trees right now, because it's a pretty sparsely soiled slope. It's very exposed. And just some clarity on the pathway and the access there. That was a really good catch. The intent is initially to get a drilling rig up to the site so that they can drill a hole into the bedrock and put a pin in there, and then firmly anchor the tower. And once they've got the drilling rig out of the way, maintenance is going to be a little bit more simplified, because I think we're going to have technicians going in by foot, and they don't need to take the more torturous route. They can do a simpler path.
Thank you.
Any further? Councillor Toporowski, then Councillor Justice.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just going off of what was just mentioned about the structure, and someone had emailed us and they had a concern about how stable the structure would be, and their concern was if there was high winds, this falling over and causing a fire. So just relaying that to see what your response was for that. Thank you.
Great point. In this instance, given that it's NavCan that is in charge of the installation, they're Canada-wide, and this is not their first tower by any means, and I suspect this is probably not their most difficult environment in which they're going to be installing a tower either. So I would be deferring to their abilities and their engineering to ensure the stability of the tower. And I think, as I mentioned, the preparation of the foundation with the drilling rig is key to that. They've got bedrock up there they can anchor the tower in, and I think in some cases where it's necessary, perhaps they anchor the towers with guy wires for additional stability on the four corners, should the wind get up there.
Councillor Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Morris. So the Diamond Head environmental report that came with this general report says that the scope of the proposed tower construction may be within the exceptions to the development permit area, and that the project might be considered a public utility, in which case the DP guidelines might not apply. So can we have some clarity about whether development recommendations in our DP need to be considered for this project?
The report that was submitted by Diamond Head is typical of what we would ask for in the case of a development permit. So we would ask for that environmental assessment. So we did receive the report. This is the approval body for the siting of this navigational aid tower is a federal entity, and there's a senior level of government. I believe they have the ability to more or less make these decisions with consultation to the local government, not necessarily subject to the local government and all of our local government processes. That being said, they're certainly honoring the consultation process, and in so doing have submitted the environmental assessment, which, as I say, is typical of what we would get for a DP. Our intent is not to subject NavCan to a development permit after this application, and our expectation is that the recommendations and the plan for the installation of the tower as laid out in the environmental assessment report will be followed by NavCan through the installation process.
Follow up?
Yeah, if I could. So just let me get some clarity about that. Try and determine whether I understand what you're saying. You're saying that the municipality shouldn't or won't be applying development permit considerations to this project because it's federal, or is it because this would be considered to be a public utility, or is there some other reason why it's accepted from the development permit area regulations?
The development permit area remains. That is a local government designation of that site with the information we have. So that is there. The question that hasn't, or it doesn't suggest itself in terms of a concrete answer, is what is a local government's ability to require a senior level of government, the federal government, to go through a local government process and apply for a development permit and go through our regular development permit process here. So that's an open question. Now, they have submitted an environmental assessment report, and our expectation is that the recommendations within that environmental assessment report will be followed by NavCan throughout the installation process of this tower. That is the same outcome that we would expect were we to issue a development permit. So our expectation as to the outcome of the environmental assessment report and recommendations is the same as if we would have put our or would be requiring a development permit. So does that help?
Yeah, I think I'm getting clear. Because I guess the follow-up question I was going to ask was, I mean, the environmental report does suggest that minimizing the impacts of ecological values during the development phase of this project should be a priority. And I really wanted to ask if there was a way in issuing this statement that we could ensure that that actually would be a priority. But I think you're suggesting that there's an expectation that it will occur, and then that's probably as far as we can go with this.
See, Mr. Conway has his hand up.
Yeah, I might be able to help a little bit with the discussion here. The authority around telecommunication facilities are clearly a federal jurisdiction, and local governments do not have any jurisdiction in that. However, there is this statement of concurrence process that's been established where input from the local government is invited before any decisions around the siting or anything to do with the installation of a telecommunication tower is approved by the federal authority. So it's really that process that should be relied upon if there's any kind of municipal concerns, if it's felt that the proposal is not compliant with the development permit guidelines or out of sync with what community expectations would be for environmental protection and anything like that. It's really the response to the statement of concurrence that would capture that. And so I do believe it is appropriate to not require a development permit in this case because we local governments do not have jurisdiction in that, but they can have their input through the statement of concurrent process.
Okay. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Mr. Conway. Mr. Conway, I had a question myself. I'm not sure if this is best directed to you or Mr. Morris, but it's with regards to one of the letters we received from the public. And this individual raises concerns about, and I'll just quote directly from the letter, flights into the airport over a wide-ranging path are occurring at lower elevations and into areas where raptor soar levels higher than the planes are descending. And then further on in the letter he writes, there needs to be an environmental review to determine the impacts to the habitat of raptors along the wide flight paths planes are now using over the southern communities of Vancouver, of the Cowichan Valley to land at Victoria Airport. So my question for staff was whether this was considered at all in the application process, and if it doesn't appear to have been considered as part of the environmental assessment report, but just wanted to check to see if that did come up for discussion at all, or if staff has any insight on these potential impacts as highlighted by the member of the public who wrote in.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. NAV Canada is aware of the input. They have a record of all the input that was submitted through their public consultation process, this letter among them. So they are aware of the individual's concerns. And I do think that's the most appropriate direction for someone's concerns of this nature to be submitted to. NAV Canada is certainly better equipped to deal with that kind of a question or concern than we are at the local government level.
And just as telecommunications is a federal authority, so is aeronautics. So really, local government doesn't have any real or any authority around aeronautics. That's an exclusive federal jurisdiction. So I don't think this process would be the suitable one for trying to deal with those concerns.
All right, thank you. I'll turn to council. Any further discussion or questions regarding this item? No? All right, I don't believe we have moved it or seconded it, so I'll turn to our corporate officer. Would we move this in one motion or break it up? It looks like it could be done as one block motion.
So, yes, the way it has been presented as one motion, but if council wants to split it, you can.
All right, yeah, we have 6 points to it, so I'll ask council if someone wants to move it as a block. Councillor Finley, seconded by Councillor Toporowski. No further discussion. I'll call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to item 8.2, Establishment of Accessibility Advisory Committee. Turn to you, Mr. Farkas.
Thank you, Mayor. The purpose of this report is to consider the draft terms of reference for establishing an accessibility advisory committee. The recommendation is that council approve the terms of reference for the accessibility advisory committee as presented in the Manager of Legislative Services April 5th, 2023 report included as attachment 1. That council appoint a counselor to serve as the chair on the accessibility advisory committee for the term of council. So we're looking for council to provide us with the counselor. And then finally, to direct staff to advertise for volunteers and schedule the inaugural Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting during Accessibility Week.
Great, thanks, Mr. Farkas. And just to provide some context for council, we did have a joint committee for this purpose with the city of Duncan, for which we had appointed Councillor Finley. I'd also add as well that there had previously been discussion, as is noted in the report, of a regional advisory committee that could have combined the different jurisdictions into one body, but as noted in the report, that's not going to be feasible within the current timelines. Obviously, it's up to council to decide who to recommend for this position, but I would just like to suggest to council and to Councillor Finley if you would be interested in taking on this appointment. I think you'd be a great fit for it.
I have no problem with that, since I was already going to be on the one from the city, Duncan. So absolutely, I'll stand for that.
Oh, perfect. So could I, assuming council's on board for that, we're not going to have a competitive election here. All right. So if we could get someone to move the recommendation, but for point 2, we'll appoint Councillor Finley to serve as the chair on the Accessibility Advisory Committee for the term of council. It's moved by Councillor Toporowski, seconded by Councillor Estache. Councillor Toporowski.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question on advertising. I noticed in the report they're looking for First Nations representation. Can a notice be sent to all First Nations that you're seeking for those appointments? Also, Cowichan Tribes does have a newsletter that for their area. I don't know about other nations, just a note. Thank you.
Going to turn to staff. That all sounds feasible.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and staff can definitely move forward on that basis.
Great, thank you. All right, any further discussion from council? I'm keeping an eye on you now, Councillor Callio, because I keep looking around the table here and missing you. All right, so, Councillor Finley.
I've got a question. I don't know if staff can answer this or not, but it says that the committee must have, where is it here? The two, sorry, let me just find it. This is just off the cuff here. The members of the, there it is. At least one member must be an Indigenous person from a local First Nation community, and at least 2 members must be persons with disabilities. If there's a time delay or a time constraint here because we have to get this done by September 1st, what happens if 1 or 2 of those things don't happen in that time frame? I'm just quite curious, because it's a demand through the Act that we have to have these 3 people. So I'm just curious how that works.
That was a great question, Councillor Finley, and I actually had a question on that as well, because I think in one part it appears to say someone with a disability, or I think there's another part that mentions it can also be someone representing an organization advocating for people with disabilities. So I'll turn to Ms. Martina.
Yeah, so that is correct. So it doesn't have to be an actual person with disabilities. It could be someone that is supporting. It could be a caregiver. It could be an organization. So we're really going to, when we send out the notice, this one here, we're going to be reaching to like IH and as well to make sure that we do cover it, because it is the legislation that is actually mandating the makeup of the committee. So one of the things that's also interesting with this particular committee is that the province is also saying that the committee makeup has got to reflect the diversity of BC. So not only do half the members must be members that have disabilities or support members of disabilities, there must be at least one. So there could be like more First Nations people, but it must be at least one person. And then, of course, the council representative. So again, so it depends on how many applications we get and how we filter that out, because we also have to put that diversity lens when making recommendations to council because of what the legislation says.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Finlay? Yeah, all right. Any further discussion from council? Councillor Toporowski. Councillor Callio, did you have a question?
No, I didn't.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, there being no further discussion, we'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to item 8.3. I'll turn to Mr. Farkas and I can provide a couple comments myself.
Thank you, Mayor. So the final report, 8.3, is to designate one or more councillors to serve as acting mayor when the mayor is absent or otherwise unable to act for the remainder of the council term. As indicated in our report, the mayor recommends that council designate Councillor Toporowski to serve as acting mayor when the mayor is absent or unable to act for the remainder of the 2022-26 term of council.
Thank you, Mr. Farkas. Maybe I'll just provide a bit of context for council with regards to this. So as is explained in the report, there's different ways you can approach the acting mayor position. Some municipalities, like Cowichan Council being examples, tend to appoint one individual for the course of the term. Others, there's a rotating acting mayor position among all the members of council, and others the mayor might recommend certain individuals to take on the role for a year or more's time. And I've seen the latter two approaches used more often here at North Cowichan, although as is described in the report, some of our neighbors do appoint an individual for the course of the term. I want to say to council, I think any one of you around the table would make a fine acting mayor. I would be more than happy to see any of you, chairing meetings in my place, speaking on behalf of the municipality when I'm not available to do so. I think all of you are more than capable of taking on that role, but I am suggesting that for this term that we appoint Councillor Toporowski for the balance of it, and just a few reasons for that. One, Councillor Toporowski being in this acting mayor's role in recent months, working with myself, I've had an opportunity to bring her up to speed on many of the day-to-day issues I'm dealing with, which I think puts her in a good position if she needs to step into the acting mayor's role if I'm at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Conference, or maybe trying to advocate on our behalf down in Victoria. So she's really up to speed on those day-to-day issues, and I think for rotating this position every few months, it's going to be doable, but a bit of a challenge for each of you to be brought up to speed on some of those issues the way that Councillor Toporowski has been in recent months. Also, Councillor Toporowski, second term, and done several terms for Cowichan Tribes Council as well, so very experienced. And I say that recognizing that there is a lot of you also have experience. I know Councillor Stash, you've served 2 terms in Saskatchewan as well, so a lot of experience around the table, but that's part of the reason why I'm recommending Councillor Toporowski. And then lastly, I think this council has made clear our commitment to equity, and Councillor Toporowski is more than capable of serving as a strong acting mayor based on her abilities, but I think there is also the equity commitments that this council has highlighted as a priority, and I think this appointing Councillor Toporowski for the balance of the term reflects that. So sorry, Councillor Toporowski, to embarrass you with all these compliments. I'll turn it to Councillor Justice.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, I think Councillor Callio actually had his hand up first, so apologies.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, Councillor Callio, then Councillor Justice.
I'd like to just agree with everything you said, Rob. I totally would like to praise Deborah also. And I think she's a good choice for the acting mayor when you're not here. Also, I'd like to support option number 2 in that I think it would be good to have others at the table to bring their knowledge and expertise forward in the coming years of the council. I'm not sure if Deborah wants to take on 4 years. She probably does, but I just like to say that I think that it would be good to have others step forward from the council table. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Callio. Councillor Justice.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I guess I have two things to say. One is I think that there's a real advantage in having consistency in who is the acting mayor. In that sort of rule, the primary rule of taking the place of you if you're absent or in going and doing some ceremonial sorts of things, cutting ribbons and that sort of thing. I think there is a real advantage in having, in a general sense, in having consistency there. And specifically, I think that there are several good reasons that we are well served with Councillor Toporowski, not the least of which is her broad experience and general thoughtfulness. But speaking to what Councillor Callio said, is that there was also some advantage to the way that we did it in the previous term, which was rotating through. And I think the real advantage there is just giving everybody who wants it a chance to have a go at chairing committees of the whole and building their skills in chairing committees of the whole. But we're not actually requiring that of the acting mayor in this term. And I think if it was the desire of a councillor like Councillor Callio or others to have a go and build some experience in chairing meetings like a committee of the whole, I'm sure that that could be arranged for a period of time. So I think that if that is in fact the desire of Councillor Callio in terms of bringing other people to the fore, I think we can accomplish that and have a consistency in the acting mayor position.
Great, thank you, Councillor Justice. Councillor Finlay.
I always found it interesting that there was a rotation. I think it was Mayor Sebring last time to do the 8 months per, and I thought that was a bit odd, just because, again, consistency. But I do agree with Councillor Callio. I said that I think it would be great to have that experience, that new experience for maybe some of us that are new at the table, and also some that also have been sitting around the table for the last term or two, to continue to have that opportunity to be the deputy mayor, acting mayor, through the term. So I would actually support Councillor Callio's suggestion of option number 2.
Councillor Stash.
Looking at me as the only one who hasn't said anything.
You don't have to
Can
speak.
we? Well, no. I'm looking at number 2 because in the wording of number 2 option, it can actually be the same as option 1 because we're just going to reflect at the end of the year if Councillor Toporowski feels that she's comfortable to continue another year. It can just carry on. If the will of council is that is the will of council right now, it just carries on. Is that actually the intention of option 2? Is it has the intent of option 1, but we just kind of have the discussion once a year. Is that what option 2 is? In the way I read it, it looks like it's option 1, but we're going to discuss it once a year.
Yeah, I think that I'm turning to staff, but
staff?
that's my understanding as well, Councillor Stash, that option 1 is commitment for the whole term of council. 2 is just for 1 year, then we reassess, whereas number 3 would actually be committing to the rotating basis.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Well, with that then, it also, I'm leaning towards option 2 because maybe it isn't that it lets us reflect maybe that someone else wants the opportunity, but it also lets the person, in this case, Councillor Toporowski, chosen as acting mayor, is they can step away from that. And maybe after a year, the person, in this case being Councillor Toporowski, who's chosen, she can say, you know what, this is maybe my time or something. It isn't a lock-in, I should say. So it allows council to be organic and just a touch base or a check-in in 1 year. So myself, I would be open to making the motion for option 2. And I'd like to move option 2, if I can do that at this point.
Sure, it's moved, seconded by Councillor Finlay. Any further discussion from council? All right, Councillor Toporowski, then Councillor Justice. Councillor Justice, you're up.
Actually, I'm just struggling to find the wording of option 2 for some reason.
Oh, page 235, it's the point right at the top there.
I know, but my
Here, you can have mine. I'm gonna hand it over. Backup agenda.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's fine. I guess the point I wanted to make is, and I tried to make it before, is that there's, you know, the way I see it, the acting mayor thing has, you know, the way that we're doing it this year, the acting mayor is really a sort of, it's not a sort of a skill building role. It was in the last term when there was a role of chairing the committee of the whole, and in some cases chairing council meetings. But this year, I think the role of the acting mayor is more just a sort of a backup for you, and to take some of the pressure off you, and to do that sort of thing. So in many ways, I think that we should really be yielding to the mayor's decision on this one, not decision or desires on this one. But I do think that, you know, those people who want to develop certain skill sets by chairing meetings or doing those sorts of mayor-like things or acting mayor-like things, we should figure out some role for giving them the opportunity, and maybe we could give Councillor Finley and Councillor Callio and Councillor Stash, whoever wants it, rotations at chairing committee of the whole meetings. But I'm fine with option 2 for now.
Yeah, just a couple points, not really quick. The whole thing with having the acting mayor chair Cal, that was part way through last term, so that was kind of a new thing we sort of invented on the fly. But and this may be neither here nor there, but there are committees as well, which is a great way to gain experience chairing. But I know Mr. Farkas had your hand up. I'm going to go back to Councillor Toporowski.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to provide a bit of clarity for council in this discussion. So in this decision that is before council around designating Councillor Toporowski as acting mayor, doesn't preclude council from rotating chair duties for Cal meetings. So just wanted to provide that clarity, given the discussion is around, you know, providing opportunities for councillors.
Yeah,
Mr. Mayor, could I just expand on that? So in the council procedure bylaw, what it states is that the mayor can designate the chair for the committee of the whole. So there was never anything that technically tied it to the acting mayor in the previous term of council. That was the former mayor's decision to designate that duty, that chairing duty of committee of the whole, to the member that was the acting mayor. So if Mr. Mayor wants to do that, he can set up whatever schedule he wants to, because he's the one that's designating that chairing responsibility, no one else.
All right, Councillor Toporowski, over to you. Councillor Stash?
I just wanted to touch back in quick to come full circle and saying, though, for everything that when you open the discussion, agree with all of that, and I am absolutely fine with Councillor Toporowski serving for the full 4 years. I just think we could take the 2-minute check-in once a year. And that's why I would like to see option 2, so that everybody involved namely the acting mayor, has a say in it.
Thank you. Councillor Toporowski, to close.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, everyone, for your kind words and whatnot. Yeah, and yeah, you did not embarrass me. Keep the praises coming, you know, like it's really great. Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for their comments, and going forward, I think these are just, you know, like it was in the report that there's rotating. I talked to Leonard Krogh last year. He thought it was really different that we did it that way, and how we had that added duties of chairing the cow meeting, right, Christopher? Those long nights of chairing and getting through those meetings were quite tiresome. And I do like how your role as the mayor right now, and how you're rolling out, inviting all of us to participate in whatever invitations that you're receiving, and you're opening it up for us to attend wherever you're able to allow us all to come. And I do like that style, because it gives us all a chance to find out the information that you're receiving and whatnot. So I just wanted to share that, and thank you for not going to like the full vote of whatever, not having me here. But thank everybody around the table, and if you do want to talk to me before December 31st, if you want to be acting mayor. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Toporowski. So we've got a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. That concludes that part of the agenda. We can now move on from reports to nothing under new business, I don't think. Oh no, sorry, I did that last time. Apologies, everyone. And it was the item I pulled as well. So item 2.2.1, so we've got a request from the BC Lyme Nonprofit Society regarding Lyme Disease Awareness Month in Canada for the month of May. And there's a couple parts to the request from this society. One is that council participate in the May 3rd green light event by lighting up Municipal Hall and other facilities with green lights, and also that we share information on North Cowichan social media sites to raise awareness. So I've discussed this with staff, and they provided some insight on kind of what's realistic given these timelines. I'll turn it over to Mr. Farkas if you could comment on that.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so staff did look into it. I did ask for, whether or not we're well situated to light up our various different municipal facilities, and certainly there is actually a large cost associated with doing that, upwards of thousands, if we were to take the advice verbatim and light up Municipal Hall and our two recreation facilities. So staff do not recommend that. However, in the past, when these sorts of requests have come forward, we're more than able as staff to advertise the event as requested, and simply sending along the links and making sure that we raise awareness in the community with respect to this particular campaign. So that's something we absolutely support, and I guess I've said enough.
Great, thank you, Mr. Farkas. And I'll just turn to staff and ask that if we were to share this on our social media pages, raise awareness, would that require a motion from council, or is it sufficient to just have general agreement around the table?
You should do a motion to direct staff to do so, because there is no policy that authorizes staff to advertise third-party events and stuff on our website and social media. So giving that direction is clear that it's, we're not opening the doors for anybody. It's just this particular event.
Great, thank you, Ms. Martineau. So I'll suggest a motion to council. We can wordsmith it if need be, but to direct staff to direct staff to share information on North Cowichan social media sites to raise awareness of Lyme Disease Awareness Month in Canada. Sound okay? All right, moved by Councillor Stash, seconded by Councillor Finley. Any discussion? Councillor Justice?
Yeah, maybe just a quick question to the corporate officer. I mean, I think that we do have a bylaw or a policy, I suppose, related to proclamation requests, and I wonder how this fits in with that.
So you are correct. There is policy that says that council does not make proclamations. So this isn't, council isn't proclaiming it Lyme Disease Month. Council is just directing staff to, you know, to help support the event by sharing their information on our social media sites. So it's not the same as doing a proclamation. A proclamation is a very formal event. We actually do go and you proclaim that this is, you know, we proclaim that, you know, this is, this month is Lyme disease awareness. So it is not the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Right.
I would just add to that, so our corporate officer is entirely correct. So the authority stems from the community charter, and it speaks to days of recognition, and that's what our proclamation bylaw really addresses. So as the corporate officer indicates, it's really not deemed to be a day of recognition of what we're being requested of.
All right, no further discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to question period, and I'll ask if there's anyone in the gallery who has any questions. State your name and address.
Mayor and Council, I already did earlier. Joyce Benson, Drinkwater Road, North Cowichan. So my question is regarding financial planning and tax increases. What is the proposed end date for North Cowichan's carbon tax of 0.5% that has been charged excessively since 2014, now 10 years? What is the end date, please?
So I'll turn to staff. Mr. Fargus. So there, I don't believe there has ever been a end date articulated with regards to the Climate Action Energy Plan. Do you recall we have
that's
had this?
my question. That's my question. Yes, I do believe it needs an end date, and I do believe that it's fair to the taxpayers to not have to continually pay 0.5% unfair tax to support
Ms. Benson,
reducing emissions
period,
in North Cowichan with a Trans-Canada highway driving right through North Cowichan that we have no control over. It's an unfair tax. So I'm asking, when is the end date? And I do expect an answer at some point in the future from this council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll now turn to IT staff, ask if there are any virtual participants with their hands raised.
Mr. Mayor, give me one moment to refresh the attendee screen. And there are no attendees with their hands raised at this time.
All right, thank you. Well, that concludes our business. I'll declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you.